everyone. Good morning. Thank you so much for joining us. It is an absolute honor to be here with Mike Butcher. Mike is the London-based editor-at-large for Techcrunch. Mike is also co-founder of the Pathfounder.com newsletter, the Europas.com, and the nonprofits techrefugees.com, techvets.co, and codec.com. He was named as one of the most influential people in European technology by Wired UK and one of the 100 most connected men in the UK by GQ magazine. And in 2016, he was awarded an MBE for services to the UK technology industry and journalism. It is an absolute pleasure, Mike. Over to you.
Hi, everybody. Looks like I can share my screen. So let's go to this baby. Here we go. So these are some slides I put together a while ago. Obviously, as you can see, extremely professionally. I'm the editor-at-large of Techcrunch. That means I can wander around the planet for Techcrunch and do my work. So I want to talk today about what news is. Now, do you ever see a purple cow? The answer obviously is no, unless perhaps you're talking about an advert for Milka in Europe, the chocolate bar. The point about saying this is that the idea of news isn't that things happen that are every day. News is really about things which are unusual or out of the ordinary. There's an old phrase in journalism, which is news is not a dog bites man, because a dog biting a man or a woman happens every day somewhere on the planet. News is man bites dog or person bites dog, because that is unusual. So we really like things which are new, fresh, unusual, stand out from the crowd. And the more of a purple cow you can be, the more likely you're going to be featured by the media. Journalists really like things which are big stories, and that's a picture of the traffic to TechCrunch the day I broke a big story about Spotify, and of course there's many other examples of that. And so we really like stories which are fantastic for our audience, and we're here to serve our readers. So the more you can think about how you present yourself as being interesting to the readership or the viewership of a news channel or outlet or website or whatever it is, the more likely it is you're going to get into the news. Just existing, unfortunately, is not news. That I'm sorry to break it to you. There has to be something, well, quite frankly, fresh, new that's going on. So just the fact that your company as a startup or as an entrepreneur exists, that unfortunately is not news. You have to be doing something fresh and new. So always bear that in mind. If you want to be in the news, then join the news agenda. This is a picture of the Hudson Bay River landings many years ago when the airliner crashed into the water. Luckily, pretty much I think everyone was saved. But on the right, you can see what was a computer animation of that incident. And that was achieved by a technology company animating the airliner landing on the water. And that technology company eventually obviously got a lot of media coverage because they'd gone to the trouble of doing that. On the left, you can see the picture of the aircraft and the rescue going on. That was taken on a startup called TwitPic, which was later acquired by Twitter because it was a way of Twitter of getting photographs onto Twitter before Twitter was able to have photographs. So if you're able to be part of the news with your company, then you're more likely to be featured in the media. I always say that getting to know the media is actually much more important than trying to issue press releases and think that, pretend you're IBM or Facebook or something. It's better to actually start to get to know the media that has the audience and the readership or the viewership that you want to reach. So if you can get to know journalists in the space that you're operating in, this is going to stand you in good stead when eventually you do want to do something like issue a press release. Obviously, a quick note about embargoes. An embargo is when a news announcement, a press release, is given a particular date and time when it's going to be released. That's an embargo. What people want generally, though, is exclusives in the news business. And the way you do that is negotiating. You know, it's often, and to do that, it's great to go for trusted journalists that you've got to know previously that will be interested in what you're doing. So how do you negotiate before you make your big announcement? And what are the reasons why you should do that? Well, it turns out that journalists are quite busy. They have a lot of incoming to deal with. It's all them. And the old days, very, very old days of just sitting at a desk and checking emails or making phone calls are very much long gone. And you get pitched from all angles now. So the average journalist now has enormous amounts of incoming, as well as having to deal with their own life, like, you know, going to a conference in Lisbon, like where I am at the moment. And so you get all of that, and then eventually someone turns up out of the blue and says on Twitter, "Hi, we've just launched our product. Can you cover us?" Now, the question is I have to make a decision now about whether or not I'm going to drop everything I'm doing and move over and look at what you're sending me. So the question is do you feel lucky? And the answer is it's much better not to rely on luck. It's much better to have prepped the media about your announcement well ahead of time. So pre-briefing is so much better. You just send a quick note. Obviously, an email is the most obvious method, and you give them a several days notice, perhaps even a week. That would be nice. And you bullet point it. You know, we're going to be doing this. We'll be doing it next week. Is this a story you're interested in? Yes or no? And the journalist can make a quick assessment, super quick assessment. And one note you've got to remember is that the subject line of your email needs to be quite good, because journalists tend to read their emails on the subject line. Really, they don't click through the whole thing all the time, because if you clicked all of the emails that you get sent, you'd never do any work. So subject lines are incredibly important. So how do you negotiate this? Well, you can talk about how you want to offer it as an exclusive. You're prepared to wait for the journalist, or you can talk about the fact that there's a time limit on it, and if we don't hear from you, then we'll go to another outlet. That's just standard practice. And when you pitch, please put like substance into the first pitch. Don't ask permission. Would you mind if I present you a press release? This is not a pitch. It's a bad idea. You've actually got to put substance into the pitch. This is what's happening. Do you want more information? That's it. And don't be long-winded. It's much better to be succinct. This is what's happening. I can offer you a comment on this story, or whatever it is. That's how you do it. And when you're a part of the industry, network. Don't be trying to avoid being transactional, and get involved in your industry, and you'll get noticed. Doing things like launch parties are never news. They're just events. If you talk about this and you're going to do a press conference or something like that, it's unlikely that you're really going to get a lot of interest from the media. Just play a straight bat, as they say in cricket. The even better is making a great product. So if you get a great product and a great startup, and the journalist hears about you via the fact that sheer amount of buzz, then you're probably going to get featured because you're just doing something interesting. So always remember that you are doing a startup, and it's much more important that you do a great product and a great company to begin with before you start thinking about trying to get news coverage. But you can also be helpful to journalists. You can send them stories that aren't necessarily about your company, but might be about your industry or what's going on. You can be helpful. And because if you're helpful as a contact, then the journalist will be more likely to engage with you when you do actually want to talk about something to do with your company or your startup. You can also make your own content. What the heck, create your own content. Some people call it content marketing. I think that it's better to be a little bit cooler than that, and to write or create content or videos or podcasts or whatever it is that's interesting for anyone to read. So you can make some news yourself. And another one is to, go up against the giant, talk about how much more interesting your company is compared to an incumbent, or what you're doing. And always target the right media for what you're doing. If you're doing a SaaS enterprise startup, then go and talk to the media that writes about SaaS and enterprise. Don't go and talk to the media that writes about apps or, consumer hardware, if you're not doing consumer hardware, right? So always target the right title, the right writer inside the title. And if you can go after, say, trade press or media or business press, often perhaps you might end up with some mainstream press, because they watch a lot of those journalists as well. If you can, try and pitch journalists in person. Obviously, it's harder, of course, obviously during the pandemic. But if not, then you can, try and be personable. Try and make yourself look as interesting as possible. Frankly, you can also do sort of slightly crazy things if you want to. Sometimes these can be a bit hit and miss. I've been pitched by someone, sent me a secret wooden box I had to kind of break into. Of course, there was just a press release inside, but it was an unusual thing. So if you can, perhaps sometimes it works if you can be a bit jazzy and stand out from the crowd. Always, if you're going to talk to the media, you're the CEO or you're the founder, then put yourself front and center. It's much better than trying to rely on, say, your marketing officer or whatever. PR firms are really about when you are big enough to afford PR firms. You generally hire a PR firm when you need to deal with the fact that you have more incoming than you can deal with. Mind you, they are professional people. They deal with the media a lot. Journalists often deal with PR people. And effectively what you're doing, if you hire a PR agency, is you're buying a relationship with the media via that PR agency, because they deal with journalists all the time. But unfortunately, if you're at an early stage, they can be expensive, several £1,000 or several £1,000 or euros. And this is just a retainer, whether or not you get featured in the media or not, and you'll still be paying that. So it's definitely for something if you've got that kind of budget. And as I said, yeah, PR firms are basically just relationships. And if you can get some kind of relationship with a media outlet or a journalist, a professional, obviously, relationship, then you're basically doing the job of the PR firm that you might hire. Never really say that you're totally unusual. It's much better to add context to what you're doing. Journalists need to kind of have some context to what you're doing. So just saying you're the only company that's ever done this is usually a little bit unlikely, to put it mildly. So if you've done all of this and you don't get any coverage, the simple answer is, I'm sorry, but something else happened that day. Steve Jobs died, or whatever it was, or Facebook went down, and unfortunately that's just the way the cookie crumbles. But don't be downhearted. You'll just have to pick yourself up and have another go later on. And if you do, by the way, encounter a journalist in real life, just remember that they're a human being. Unfortunately, I've been pitched in some rather unusual places, such as the urinal and in the toilet, standing there doing my own business. So best to avoid doing that kind of thing. So what is the story? Well, it's competition. You created something that's going to kill a big company, or is going to be highly competitive. Obviously, gossip. We like interesting things. Probably not going to be about your company, but you might want to send it on to a journalist. Perhaps you'll be helpful as a contact. You've got insights. You're a trend will change the world. You're part of a big trend. Perhaps you're an evolution. Your startup is Y. Startup Y is like the X for Z. You're the Airbnb for cats. Who knows? And success. You got 1 billion downloads of your app or something. You got failure. We didn't do well. Here's why we didn't do it. Here's why we're pivoting. That can actually be turned around to be a positive story for you. And you're unusual. You're you've got celebrity involved, or you're super unusual because you from slightly more obscure city, and you've done something unusual like brought Facebook down or whatever. So what sort of things do you? Well, just like I said, keep it simple, keep it very, very easy to digest. Some key bullet points. See, there's some useful bits like video or audio or images, direct links to things like photographs of the founders. You just use plain text in the email. Try not to use PDFs and attachments. It just gets really annoying. You have to having to download things all the time. It just takes time. Bits and pieces about the company that are just going to be useful, and obviously your contact details. So always know who to contact. Try and create a relationship with the media before you pitch. Try and be unique. Personalize the pitch to the outlet. Make it fairly obvious that this is a good story for me, say at Techcrunch. Sort of be insulting. Always be professional. Always try and be personalize what you're doing to that media outlet. And that's it. That's basically it. Bye, everybody. Ciao.